When life is suddenly upside down due to illness or catastrophe, all who are involved find themselves challenged in knowing what to do, where to turn, and how to handle the wide array of issues that come their way that can't be ignored. Ed and Carol Neuenschwander have experienced this firsthand due to a life-threatening battle with cancer. Today, Ed tells us about his book, Journeys Without Scripts, which is designed to help us find direction in these situations. He is joined by his wife, Carol, and together they tell us about their own journey without a script and offer biblical and practical wisdom about how to walk through such a time, so don't go away.
In order to make your way through an experience like this early on, you have to choose a backdrop that you are going to place behind it, because that backdrop is going to interpret for you how you handle everything that comes along.
Welcome back. We're joined by Ed and Carol Neuenschwander. Ed's book, Journeys Without Scripts, is a helpful guide and comfort for those experiencing what he calls the bottom falling out on their lives. It is based in part on their own experience of crisis. What started out as a refreshing vacation to Mexico turned into something entirely different. Far from home and in a foreign setting, the life-altering news about Carol's health was delivered. Today they describe this experience and share the insights that help them through this catastrophe and can help you through whatever catastrophe you might be experiencing. Thank you for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
First, catch us up. What is behind the reasons you wrote this book?
When we were in Mexico, and a young Mexican physician said to Carol, "Senora Neuenschwander, you have acute leukemia." We looked at each other and she said, "What?" And I said to her, "Honey, we're in Mexico. Maybe we ought to wait till we get home to find out what this really is." After a blood transfusion and hours of waiting, we finally got to San Francisco, went straight to UCSF. And sure enough, the physician was right. She had acute myeloid leukemia. And suddenly it felt like everything was changed and it was being redefined. Nothing was familiar. Carol was sick and on her way to being treated in an emergency room, which was frantic at that. And I realized I was trying to begin to guess, how does one start to collect all the things that are falling rapidly before you? And I found myself, as she was ill and preoccupied with the matters that were swirling around her, I was with the loved ones in other areas who were all sitting here saying, "Now what? What do you do?" Yes. And it's almost like sitting in the cockpit of that plane in Star Wars where everything goes into warp speed and you do not know what to do. And we found that people turn to a computer, they start to panic, and you don't know where to even begin. After our experience with this, and after having chronicled what went on, look back and realize there were about 40-some things that in one way or another each of us had to cope with, that there was no instruction manual beforehand. And it would have been nice to have had at least something that would have given you some initial starting points that could stabilize your heart, and also give you some idea where to begin to unravel these things, because, as I said, everything is different. It's no longer the same.
It's like you have a game plan, you know where you're headed, you know what you're going to do the next week, where you're going to dinner, where you're going to lunch, where you're going to live, what you're going to do in the next 10, 20 years, and all of a sudden, you don't know anything.
Exactly.
Your life's turned totally upside down. In fact, when I first received that information, it was almost like I didn't believe what I was being told. And it, like people talk about, I can't even believe this is happening, and that's what it felt like. And in particular, in that context, you go down for a vacation, and here you are, you're learning this.
So tell us the story. Did you got sick, or?
I was actually, had been very tired, had worked had crammed a lot into my life before we left on this vacation, and had become so weary, and just kind of chalked it up to I've overdone things. But when we first arrived there, I slept all the time, and I thought, just give me a day or two.
Yeah.
I just, even though I was sleeping, it was getting worse and worse. Kind of refused to go, and then Ed said, "No, we're going." So this is kind of that.
So then you went to the doctor and saw him, and
We went to a clinic in Puerto Vallarta in the marina. It was really interesting. I didn't know there were yellow pages in Mexico, but I was scanning the yellow pages in our room looking for anything that was familiar, and we saw the advertisement for a hospital that was American-owned. So we went there and found it was not American. The physicians weren't trained in America.
Right.
It was American-owned, but it was clean and attractive and whatever, and it was reassuring, for the moment. But we began feeling like suddenly we're groping. The information doesn't sound right, the setting doesn't seem right, and we were so far away from home.
And you never thought anything like this would ever happen to you?
No.
Great health, everything.
And I was going to say one thing that I could not believe is they would not let me get back on the plane to go back home unless I had a blood transfusion. Well, they weren't able to locate my blood type soon enough. I was able to get some, and I did get some, but not enough that for the airlines that they required for me to be healthy or strong enough to actually go. But they did. The Lord interceded there, and we were able to come home in spite of it all. But that gave me enough energy to get on the plane and actually fly back home.
Okay, now how long ago was this?
Actually, it was 5 years ago, July the 26th.
And how are you
So
doing now?
I am amazingly, thank you, Lord. They never say that with leukemia that you are healed, but I am in remission, and I have continued to be in remission for 5 years, which is really, thank you.
5 years from her stem cell transplant.
Which is also outlined in the book. In fact, let me read. I found it very interesting that you really do. You kind of walk people through your experience.
Right.
It's you're likely holding on this book because something has penetrated your life without warning. Perhaps the tide has risen suddenly on what appeared to be a clear day, and you are still trying to figure out where it came from. The magnitude of the news may be greater than you ever expected, particularly because it relates to you or someone very close to you, such as your husband or your wife or your child. Carol and I know what this is like, for health crises have hit us twice recently, both cancer and often fatal types. As you know by now, certain words can cause the bottom to drop out of your life and leave you reeling for air.
That's right.
And I went on and on and on to read this, and quite frankly, experienced some of this in my own life and circumstances, and appreciated seeing it here in writing. So appreciate what you've done. Well, there's so much more, and they're giving me a wrap for the first segment, so we'll have to go, but when we come back, you'll tell us some more about your experience and where you are today and how this book can help others. More with Ed and Carol.